California, which is really what launched FEMA back in the beginning of '90s. And we were selected to help start and form Florida Task Force 2, which is one of the 28 federal FEMA teams coming out of the city of Miami. And had the privilege of serving as a medical specialist and medical team coordinator till shortly before my retirement. So it was a great ride, fun ride, and now I get to have the privilege of instructing, teaching with Disaster Medical Solutions. We've been able to provide instructions and using the Agility 360 camera, not just in the U.S., but many members in the INSARAG Association, which I understand are probably listening as we are here speaking. So many of those teams across the nation. And I guess some of the experiences that they wanted to hear that we've been associated with, either from the fire department and also from the USAR task force, of course, include Hurricane Andrew, the Oklahoma City bombing, Puerto Rico building explosion, the Value jet crash in the Everglades, the World Trade Center attacks, Hurricane Katrina, many other hurricanes, and of course the Haiti earthquake retiring shortly after. And Matt, I guess you wanted to bring up some things regarding medical response in USAR events. And I know that this is the focal point, and USAR is the focal point, and why search cameras were really invented and taken us to that. But as Alan mentioned, it's grown. And Agility has really taken that to a new level, that it's not just the urban search and rescue, big disaster, but any special operations event that requires personnel for possible people trapped, an entrapment, an engulfment, a structural collapse, a bridge collapse, a pet stuck inside a sewage. As Alan mentioned earlier, just the suspension from a high line coming down during a rappelling or during a save entry. We deal with suspension injuries and crush injuries around the extremities just from that. So you can imagine what you'd be able to capture with that camera, being able to give you that personal view of what's going on with that patient. And so I'd like to really we're real thankful that Agility stepped out of the box and listened to a lot of the providers, took that information, and bam, created the MRK1. I think it's on the medical side, it's our slice of piece of bread. We know that the big cameras are out there. We know the importance of them. And we always see that when the cameras are brought out, used for very technical purposes, the tech search personnel are there, the engineers are there, the commanders are there, and we very, very, very rarely get medical personnel involved. No one ever calls the medic over there and says, hey, what do you see and what do you think? And it's pretty astonishing, because once there is either verbal or visual contact with a victim, guess what? He's mine now. It's a medical patient. I can now begin assessment, I can begin treatment, and then we can talk about extrication a little bit later at a longer time. But I believe that the camera, especially a smaller camera that is able to be immediately deployed upon a special event, a special operations event, has extremely changed the way that we can bring medicine to those entrapped victims with limited access. Search cameras are mostly operated, we said, by those personnel, and we believe that before any movement of those patients are done, before they realize as they're looking through the camera that extrication is perfect and timing, and let's get them out of there and let's get them to the hospital, we've saved a person. Treatment is very important. We know that if a person is entrapped and suffers from what we know is crush syndrome, from heavy material or a heavy weight lying upon them, or just themselves lying upon their own heavy tissues and not being able to roll over, will create crush in itself, i.e. somebody on a backboard that is immobilized and can't move for 12 hours. Those buttocks and those shoulders and back will tend to have issues. And so we know that we decrease survivability by moving those patients. So putting the camera in, finding a way to extricate, quickly moving that patient, getting them to medical care is not the way we treat in this century. Should not be. We don't do it in the austere environment of the military, and so we should definitely not do it with all the resources that we have here in this country. We should be able to provide treatment, and that includes treatment for those certain issues, i.e., as we mentioned, with crush. In our area, we call it, it's more of a stay and play instead of a load and go. We don't talk about the golden hour. We're really talking about the golden day, because by the time that the cameras, hopefully, and what we're trying to push and what we're trying to be hopeful for, especially in the community, and now as a retiree being one that's going to be rescued, is this camera really belongs on every commander, fire battalion, EMS commander, small EMS departments with non-fire, small fire departments. The availability, the price structure, and the ability to be able to save a life with this is second to none. I'd really like to show you some of the presentations that we put together. It gives you an idea exactly what it might look like underneath there. We know that providing care to that person and providing care to those individuals that are down there is as important as extrication. The extrication may take a little time. It may take 10 minutes. It may take 10 hours. And in that time, is there anything that we can do for that patient during that time? So I'll just put you really quick through a little presentation on a PowerPoint and give you an idea of what's going on. But you'll be able to see that
live right there. You go.
Okay.
You're live. You're ready. Oh. You're ready to go into presentation.
You got it. Welcome to the limited patient assessment. And this is the gist of this camera for us on the medical side. We believe that we can actually do a limited patient assessment. Patient seems to be at a distance of at least 12 feet. We're going to try and provide an evaluation, but could you imagine if I can see 360 degrees after providing entry from the camera, looking all the way down to her feet, looking all the way to her head, looking on the other side of her? Can I now provide a better medical assessment by having better equipment? And if the answer is yes, then that's a no-brainer for those of you that are out there and able to purchase this for your department, for your members, and mostly for your community. So the challenge is that we got to modify how we're going to evaluate this person. We got to form a treatment plan. You can see that this person isn't really responsive at this point in time, face is down. At one point, though, that water bottle that you see to their left was not there. That water bottle was provided to that patient. That water bottle was provided to the patient through the same hole that was bore for the camera head to be inserted to find those victims. During the Haiti earthquake, we did find and learn that some of the water bottles, because of some of the holes that were bored, were too large. The water bottles just didn't make it without being squeezed. And so one of the things that Solid Responder did was create a survivor pod, a small 2-inch, 2-inch wide, 12 inches long pod that you could provide items for these patients. And I'll give you an idea on some of those items in a minute. You can see as a search cam, it's a very valuable tool. The gentlemen are able to look at it in the picture. They're trying to establish location. They're trying to establish how many patients there are. They're trying to see if they can go through a primary and a secondary survey and even do an advanced care. It's now time to bring in a medic and see what else we can accomplish from there. And so as a medic, in speaking to these patients, being able to provide a voice along with a visual contact, we're able to ask her to lift her head. She follows command. Or ask her for a focal. She's able to look at us. So I've accomplished a level of consciousness. I know my patient's breathing. I sure know their blood pressure is pretty stable, in that she was able to not only drink the water bottle had moved, but she was also able to lift her head. On the far right-hand side, you can see what an extricated, possibly almost a self-extricated victim would have looked like. And to give you an idea what those victims look like, and not that a medic is going to find anything that a tech search specialist who spends time practicing with this camera, but it is a great idea if you do have a camera to spend some time searching, practicing with it. But you can see on the left-hand picture the small eyes, the crown of the nose, and the forehead of victim. On the middle picture, they move the camera to the right, and you could see a second victim. You could see the mouth, you could see the cheeks, and in the third picture to the right, they were able to expand the size and capture both victims. And so as Alan was moving the camera and showing during the preview of how the 360, you could imagine the better view, the expanded view, better said, that we would be able to get with these pictures if we had the ability of using a 360 camera. Unfortunately, in 2010, during the Haiti earthquake, agility had not yet invented the 360 camera. So we were limited to straight focal shots of what we could see. And this would give you an idea on a verbal. So we've gone from visual to now verbal and communicating with those patients. A little hand movement. Fixing a face mask and holding a face mask to her face. And so listening to the person within the whole puts us back to a real quick little intervention in those water bottles. We try to provide patient care, patient PPE. I like to send it down with a light stick because if you've been in darkness for over a period of time, whether it's day or night inside a confined space, most of the time it's pretty dark. So having a light stick illuminating the area, illuminating that for the patient, sometimes is a breath of fresh air and definitely a psychological intervention. Inside those bottles, we also put in dust mask, eye shield or eye protection. We put in a moist towelette, some type of saline that they can rinse their face off. You could see the picture on the left, the gentleman. His face is not the same color as his hands. He was able to use some of the water and get the dust off of his face, which is pretty important for us regarding dust impaction and how long he's been inhaling the dust. He was able to put his own mask on, and he had a hard time getting to the child who was next to him. You could see how he is positioned. He only has his left hand to work with. His right arm is impinged from the shoulder. And he's trying to be able to help the young lady on the left who was finally rescued. You could see her on the right. Usually about 7 hours later, trying to protect her. One of the things we forgot to put down there, and you heard it during the video that you just saw, was her screaming. She screamed because we forgot to put earplugs inside there. Something so simple that we could have put inside that water bottle along with the face mask and the eye pros was a set of earplugs that might have not let her hear the starting of the saws for extrication, and it would have prevented some of the psychological events that we caused her to go through. A couple other pictures for you to see how patient care can grow as the area becomes more breached, usually through the use of search cameras because they're able to see extra areas of entry and also extra areas of extrication. They finally made it to these patients where they can start IV lines. We can begin treatment for crush and or any other issues that these victims may have. Picture on the left-hand side, you can see that in 2010, they used a search cam. We talk about having equipment with limited access, what's important. And we feel that search cams are very important. They were used by these several teams, not only by Florida's teams, but also by New York and by LA County and Virginia 1. Search cams were very, very used. On the right-hand side, the picture of one that was rescued with an amputation that was performed during that time. And since we talked about the amputation on that, let's understand the importance of a possibility of having to come and having to be presented with a situation like that. Is that limb intact? Are we able to see the other side of that limb? Is the limb crushed? Is the limb totally intact? Alan mentioned the fact of being able to use the camera during automobile accidents. I know that if I took a Kelly tool and punched a hole in a fuselage and was able to introduce the camera into the car, the vehicle, the bus, the train, the printing press, whatever it was, if I was able to gain entry into that area and see what's on the other side of the victim, what can't we see? At times that limb may be mangled, and at that time, life over limb, unstabilized patient, it is time to amputate and then do a field amputation to remove the patient. But at times that limb may be in great shape. That commander sees the limb and turns around to his crew and says, I don't care what you need to do, you're not doing an amputation. She has a great looking leg on the other side, so we're going to do everything possible to extricate this person completely intact. And so you see the other scenarios that are there for that. Alan did mention the mine industry, since the camera is not intrinsically there. But in decision making, that we're always thinking the type of entrapment, how long they've been in there, how long it's going to take them to get out. Do we have any treatable injuries? how many patients are there, the kind of patients, the amount of resources and capabilities it's going to take. Hazardous materials, Alan mentioned the possibility of seeing or not being able to see electrical lines. When he was showing the camera with the 360, you were able to capture those electrical lines, but unfortunately with a camera that only shows in one direction, you may not see those hazardous materials and or hazardous incidences that are there. And then again, how long it's going to take us to reach them. So the equipment is definitely a preparation, constant need, one to bring the victim's rescue and victim's medical treatment, being ready to provide for them. And then as you see, the search cam being operated by a tech search team member, specialist, and then the image of the FL360 camera. And what we're able to do is we're able to do a visualization direct with camera. We're able to do a palpation. We can ask that victim if they can go ahead and do a self-evaluation of themselves, i.e. when a soldier, an airman, a sailor, an IED explodes next to them, they quickly do their own self-evaluation. They go for each extremity and they check their important intact groin area, and they realize that not only are they alive, but they also have their extremities. Patients can do these self-assessments. That's why it's so important for a medic to be behind a search camera so that he can work visually and verbally with these patients as they're inside these areas. Secondary things that we're able to do so many things. I've had the privilege of working with the 360 camera in that we can even see the detail of dust movement from a patient whose face is on the ground in a dusty area on the floor. As he's breathing and speaking, the dust moving in the camera. And so even without verbal contact, able to see that that patient was alive just through the dust that was moving from those areas. The cameras allowed us so many other things. We're able to do and provide medical treatment down those holes. I'm able to provide glucose in one of those pods and hand it down there. I'm able to provide a pulse oximeter, so now I can get blood pulses, I can get respiratory rates, I can get saturation rates. I can possibly prevent a breathing treatment with some beta-2 agonists so we can help drive some of that potassium back into the cell from any injuries that they may have, which would also help the patient with coughing. So there's many other things that we're able to do, and I just wanted to bring some of those